this point. Okay, so let's go. We're on Daf 10, Yud Amud Aleph 10a, and we are going through these slightly complicated cases in terms, and again, invoking a lot of these principles of helping us ascertain different cases of Sveikos. So we're going to hopefully wrap that discussion up today with a bunch of different cases. And again, like we did yesterday, we're going to list a case by Chametz and find a parallel with somewhere else, and use that parallel case to extrapolate a certain principle as it applies to Chametz and Matzah. To Chametz rather. As we'll see today, it's even a little bit more confusing because some of the cases will extrapolate a principle, but the principle will not be a perfect parallel. So we'll come out with a slightly different conclusion than the case we are basing it on. You'll see what I mean. So he says like this: Tzibur echad shel chametz. Okay, so we're on 10a1, and we're at the third paragraph on column 1. Tzibur echad shel chametz. If there's one pile of chametz, okay, one pile of chametz outside of the house. Ulefanav shnei batim medukin. And in front of the pile of chametz, there are two searched homes. Okay, so imagine you have two neighbors. They cleaned their homes, and then they had a pile of chametz outside their home in the yard. All right, that was meant to be, tomorrow they're going to burn it, but they took it outside. Okay, and then this mouse comes and takes some chametz. We know when it's one of the houses, we're just not sure which house it went into. So we see it run in, and we know the mouse is gone. We look everywhere else, it definitely didn't go somewhere else. It went into one of the houses with chametz. So the Gemara says, Hainu shnei shvilim. This is analogous to the case of two paths in the following Mishnah. It's not taught in the Mishnah. Shnei shvilin. There are two paths. Echad tameh v'echad tar. One path is tameh. Okay, why is it tameh? Because there's a grave there. We know that there's a person buried on that path, and when you walk down the path, by definition, you become tameh. The grave is literally like under the entire path. So a person walks down the path, they became tameh. The echad tar, and the other path is completely tar. V'halach be'echad mehem v'asa taros. And one person walks down one of them, and then after he finishes walking down, he goes ahead and he touches food which was tahar. Okay, which is pure. Uva chavero. Then his friend comes, v'halach b'sheni v'asataros, and his friend comes and walks down. He knows he walks on a different path than his friends, and then he also touches tar food. Okay, but they don't know which path they walked into. Down. Okay, they both know they walked on different paths, and then they both touched tar food. Right? And so now one of them walked down something which was tameh. So one of these foods should be tameh, right? But they just don't know which one they walked down. Rabbi Yehuda Amar, Rabbi Yehuda says, if they inquire individually, okay, they go to the rabbi and say, hey, what's the halacha? Okay, and so the rabbi will say, they're both tahar. There's a principle when it comes to tuma bershus harabim, when there is a suffix tuma, rather, there is a doubt about tuma, there's uncertainty about tuma, and it took place in a public domain. We learn in Gemara and Sota that in such a case, the suffix is tahar. We rule leniently. Okay, so when there's a doubt, we rule leniently. So this is a public domain. They're walking in paths outside, right, in the public, and they don't know which one. They know that someone went on a tummy path, and they both go to the rabbi to ask him what is the halacha. The rabbi says, well, Reuven comes in front of him, and he says, okay, well, it's a suffix tuma, bershus harabim. It's a suffix about tuma bershus harabim in a public domain. You're tar. And then 5 minutes later, Shimon comes. Okay, he says, you're also tar, because each person's question is dealt with individually, even though by definition they're contradictory. They both can't be tar. One of them is tameh, but since each question came individually, we treat them both tar. Okay. However, shneim vas achas, they come together tamein. Then we have to default and say, since I can't objectively say you're both tahar, even though the principle should apply, I'm just kind of stuck, and therefore we default into saying that they are tamei. Okay, we're going to elaborate a little bit more on this machlokas in a moment. Rabbi Yossi Omer ben kach uven kach tamei. Rabbi Yossi says, no, in this case, you're right. In general, if you have a suffix about tuma, we say you're tamei. But in this case, normally if you have a suffix of tuma bershus harabim, you say you're tar. But in this case, you have two people, then you're going to go ahead and say they're tamei. The Gemara elaborates. Amar Rabba v'Tamer Rav Yochanan, or Amar Rabba v'Tamer Rav Yochanan, either Rabba or Rav Yochanan explained and said, B'vas achas divrei kol tamein. He said, if they come together, everyone would agree that they're both tamei. Okay, again, because you're kind of stuck.
What's the consequence of them being tamei?
The food is tamei.
The food is tamei.
Correct. I don't. Yes, no. The Gemara. The Rishonim points out that the case is deliberately asked about the food because I believe the Gemara is going to say many of the Rishonim say that the person would also have to be tovel. The food is just stuck. So that's what meaning. If it was the person, then we would just say go tovel, both of you. But the food, it's done. You can't do anything. Okay. So it says Rava or Rav Yochanan. When they come together, everyone's going to agree they're tamei. Everyone agrees when they come one after another they're tahar. What's the real machlokas? Lo nechlu ela b'vas acha v'lishael alav v'alchavero. What they're arguing about is when one person comes and says, "Hey, me and my friends went and this happened." Don't ask the question that way. He messed up, right? So basically what he's doing is forcing the case to be one case. Rav Yossi says, this is literally the case of them coming together, because that's essentially what's happening. Rav Yehuda says that no, it's different. Why? Because the person, what the rabbi should do, if he was a wise rabbi, should only say, if a person comes in and say, hi, Reuven comes in and says, I, Reuven, went and on this path, I don't know which path, my friend Shimon also did, so what he should answer is, you're tahar. You're tahar. In other words, you should only address one case. Even though they're being asked together, you should only address one case, and then the Reuven should infer from there, I'm tahar, and I should tell my friend Shimon, he's tahar as well.
So
Okay.
never ask for a friend.
Ask for a friend, right? Asking for a friend, right? So let's see. So similarly in the case of chametz, so if they each come individually, again, there's two houses. In the case of chametz, they each come to the rabbi and say, what should the halacha be? We rule leniently. If they come together, right, then we're going to say they both have to search again, okay? And if a person goes ahead and says, well, this would happen to me and my neighbor, then we're going to have that same machlokas. Okay, fine. Yeah.
Does this have anything like any relation then to this whole, like, if you go to 10, if you're not sure which of the 10 kosher restaurants, you might go to the non-kosher, even though it's 9, like, I don't.
How do these all relate? Okay, so again, this is and Dov will tell me we got to have a class on this because he's right, as he told me. But this is, yeah. I mean, these cases literally are like there are principles and they do align, and you have to figure them all out together. If you're bored later today, you can see there's a section within the Shach, who is one of the more complicated, more difficult to understand and very brilliant early Achronim on the Shulchan Aruch and Yoredeir, where he talks about all the klalei sveikos, all the principles of sveikos, and you go one by one, and he shows how they all interact and how they relate. But it's beyond the scope of our discussion. But yes, there has to be some consistency between them, and how do these principles relate? There is a logic to it. It's beyond the scope of what we're able to do right now. But good. This is, the beauty of this is that we recognize like all this stuff, like we're scratching the tip of the iceberg is important, but we're at the tip of the iceberg. Okay, Safek al Safek allow. Okay, new case. New case now is that they have the mouse outside, and we don't know if it went into the house or not, right? So, in other words, you have chametz outside the house. You have a mouse which took some chametz from the pile outside the house, and the house is cleaned. You don't know, and you're not sure if the mouse went in or not. So the Gemara says, Hainu Bika, this is the same case, the open field. What's that? We have Machlokes Rav Eliezer Rabbanan about the following case. It's not a nichlas, the Bika Mosig Shamin. If a person enters an area of an open field during the rainy season, okay, so why did he mention the rainy season? Because like this, during the summer, the fields are already harvested, and the fields are basically dry and empty, and therefore the law is you're allowed to walk through people's fields, like their farms, during the summer, because no one minds, because there's nothing there. It's empty, right? During the winter, while the crops are still there, you can't walk there because you're going to be walking on crops. No one wants you to do that, and therefore going into a field is now seen as a private domain during the winter, because you're not supposed to be there, right? We said earlier that the laws of Tumah change if it's the public, if it's public or private. So in the summer, it would be considered a public place since everyone's able to be there. In the winter, we'll treat it as a private place. So again, person goes into a field, Vitum beside plonis, and there's Tumah in a certain field within this larger area. Vamar echad halachti makom alaz, and one person says, I went through that area. But I don't know whether I went into that particular field where there is a grave or not. So in other words, there's a whole huge area. Okay, there's acres and acres. Person knows he went through that general area. He doesn't know if he went through the area that has the grave. Okay, so question if he's tamei. Rabbi Eliezer b'tahar, the Chum b'tamim. Rabbi Eliezer says you are tahar, and the Chum say you are tamei. Why? Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer said safek bia tahar. So even though, in other words, the Chum make a lot of sense, because generally it's a safek tuma bershus hayachid. It is whenever, again, we said the principle is if there's a doubt about tuma in a public domain, then we rule leniently. If there's a doubt about Tumah in a private domain, we rule stringently. So the Chacham, we understand. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, this is not the classic case of Safek Tumah versus Yachid, because over here, the real question is, did I even enter that space? In other words, Safek Tumah, so he says, like, he distinguishes. He says, Safek Bia Tar. If it's a concern about whether I went in entry, then I'm going to be tar even in a private domain. Safek maga tuma tame. The case where we say that there is a safek, there's a doubt about tuma in Rishus Yachid, and whether or not that we rule leniently, that's a scenario of whether you're going to touch something specific. Okay, I'm not sure. whether I know I went to this particular place, and I just don't know if I touched or came into contact with this particular thing, that's going to be the suffix tumah b'rishus hayachid that we're going to rule stringently. But over here, the question is, did it even come near that place? Because we're dealing with a whole large field. I don't even know if I went in. So it's a more primary suffix. That's not the suffix tumah b'rishus hayachid that the Torah talks about. Okay? So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer would say, I don't know if I even went into the house, right? I don't know if the mouse went into the house. Similar to the case of the person, I don't know if I went into that part of the field. And therefore, you'd rule, you don't have to do another bedika, right? So in other words, and the Chachamim, though, and this is where it gets a little interesting, the Chachamim would agree in this case and say that although in the case of Tumah, they said, if I don't know if I went in, we'll rule stringently, but that's because it's deoraisa, that's biblical. Over here, since we're dealing with bedikas chametz, which is derabanan, rabbinic, therefore even the Chachamim would agree over here. So they're going to this case, you have a mouse. If you have chametz, you put chametz outside your house, and then you see a mouse come and grab that chametz, everyone would agree, and you don't know, did it go into the house, or did it go right around the house? So one quickly, I couldn't see, I'm not sure, I don't know what to do. Tahar, you don't have to do any search, because even if it'd be biblical, Rabbi Eliezer would agree, and over here, since it's rabbinic, even the rabbis would agree. Okay? Next case. Al ubadak lo eshkach. Let's say you have a case where the mouse did go into the house, and then you search, and you didn't find it. In other words, so what's the concern over here, or the possibility over here? Either A, you didn't find it, or B, it ate it, right? There's always that possibility, right? So you don't know which one it is. So plugder meir v'rabanan. Okay, these words are a little deceiving, according to the way Rashi learns it. This is a dispute between Rameir and the Rabbanan. Now we'll see. It seems like the way Rashi learns is that there's actually not going to be a dispute about our case, but let's see. Anything that is presumed to be tameh, la'olam hu b'tumaso. So if you have something which has a status of tameh, we've established a tameh, it is going to stay tameh until you know exactly where the tumah is, meaning what became of the tumah. In other words, if you know something is tameh, you have to assume it's tameh until proven innocent. Tamei until proven tar. If something had the status, you have to prove otherwise. The Chacham omrim, the Chacham say, bodek ad shemegia l'sela or lekarka basula. A person is allowed to go ahead and search. So in other words, so let me just explain a little bit more. We're dealing with a case where there is Tuma, you know that there's Tuma in, let's say, you know that there is Tuma in a certain place, and the Rameir says, until you find the Tuma, you have to assume that there's Tuma in this field. The Chum say, no, you search through the ground, and if you don't find it, then you can assume that some animals came and they ate it. In other words, you can make that assumption. So over here too, the Chacham is certainly going to say, right, the Chacham who said when it comes to a corpse, when it comes to, let's say you had a little bit of a flesh that was in a place, you search until your hand can reach. Okay, and basically in that point, if you dug a little bit and you haven't found it, you could assume that some animal got it and is gone. Similar to the chametz, you could assume the animal ate it. Rameir would, according to Rashi, Rameir would agree in this case because again it's rabbinic, and therefore he would also agree that whereas in the case of Tuma, he would say no, you have to find it until you find it, or you know for sure what happens to Tuma, you have to treat this whole area as Tameh. Whereas over here he would agree, since again the requirement for Badika is Jirabana. Okay, next case. Al ubadak v'ashkach. Let's say a person goes and mouse goes into a house, and then the person finds some chametz, but he doesn't know if it's the same chametz the mouse brought in. Okay, so now this sounds a little neurotic. This sounds like, okay, you found chametz, you could assume, but the question is, how do you know? How do you know? You saw the mouse go in. Okay, you didn't follow the mouse. You saw the mouse go in with the chametz in its mouth, and now you go and do bedikas chametz in your house, right? And you find chametz. But do you know definitively that this was the chametz that the mouse brought into the house? So when it says plukta Rabbi from Shem Gamliel, it's machlokes Rabbi from Shem Gamliel. Titania Sada Sheneva Bokever. Let's say you have a field in which a grave has been lost in it. Okay, so in other words, you know that someone was buried in this field. Okay, so you know someone was buried in this field, and so what happens? A person who goes into such a field is tameh, because we know that there's tumah somewhere in that field. However, nimsa bakever. Let's say at one point you start digging around, you find a grave. So, then a person goes into another part of the field, you can say, well, the grave is there, right? So in other words, again, you know someone was buried in this field. Until you do any searching, you walk into that field, you have to treat the whole field as tameh. But at some point, let's say you find a grave over here, right? But if you walk in over here, you could say, well, the grave is over here, that's the grave. I walked over here. So the Tanakhama, Rebbe says, if I found that grave, I say shani omer kever shavad hu kever shnimsa. The one that was lost is the one that was found. However, Rebbe Reb Shem Gamliel omer tibada kol asadikula. Reb Shem Gamliel says, who says maybe the grave you found was another grave? Maybe there's another grave there. How do you know? Okay, so similarly over here, Rebbe would say that if you found chametz, you could assume that was the chametz that was lost. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no. Who says? How do you know those the chametz is lost? Maybe it's new chametz, and therefore you'd have to continue searching the house. Now, Tos is a little bothered. What's the point of searching the house, right? In other words, if you've already, if you've already searched the house, like we keep on searching till what point? Like it's a little bit complicated to know, like at what point where the searching ends, because the whole case we're talking about is a person who found they lost chametz in the house, they searched chametz in the house, they found chametz. So what do we tell the person? Keep on searching until what? Until you find more chametz, but you still have to assume the new chametz is also not the same chametz that was lost. So it's a little bit hard to, so the Rishonim deal with this as to like at what point does this end according to the more stringent view. Okay, not for today. Sorry. Different case. Let's say this is more bizarre. You lost 9. You left 9 pieces. Okay, so it's bedikas chametz nights for the, you did your bedika and then you left 9 donuts for your family. So they could, of course, they have to have their donut rush. You don't have donuts the whole year, but you have Hanukkah and Erev Pesach. That's the 2 times people have Dunkin' Donuts. Okay, so you leave 9 donuts, but you find 10 donuts. Now it's bizarre. What's going on, right? So plug to the Rebbe Rabbanan. This is machlokes Rebbe Rabbanan. The Tadi taught hiniach mana matz masayim. Let's say a person put a mana, one measurement, one amount of meiser sheni money, okay, in a box. Okay, so meiser sheni money is consecrated money, and then you come and later you find 2 manas worth of meiser sheni. So it's doubled up. So chulin and meiser sheni morav and zevazeh. Rebbe says, okay, so you assume one of them was meiser sheni that you left behind, another one is chulin money. Okay, so there's a way of dealing with it, but the bottom line is you only have to assume that one of it, that one mana worth is what you left behind. The Chacham say that no, all the money is assumed to be chulin, like non-consecrated. Why? Because the Gemara assumes you're going to be very careful with meiser sheni. You're not going to dump some chulin money, unconsecrated money, together with meiser sheni money. And therefore what must have happened is that you must have gone in absentmindedly, or what you weren't thinking, and you took the meiser, or whatever, you took the meiser sheni money out, and you put it somewhere else, and then you put 2 chulin instead. In other words, we're assuming you're going to be very conscientious, never mix together chulin and meiser sheni, and therefore if you find 2 and you know you left 1, it must be that you took the meiser sheni out, you forgot that you did, and you put 2 chulin thing. Now over here, that's going to actually come out the opposite. Okay, so what's going to come out is that according to Rebbe, you're going to always assume that that the last, so according to the Chachamim, what you see over here is that they're concerned that sometimes you're going to make a switch and you're going to forget about it. So here too, if you go ahead and make a switch, so the Chacham are going to be strict, okay, and basically say that that basically we're going to say that all of the okay, 1 second. The question is, sorry, one second. Yeah, either way it's chametz, right? Either way it's chametz. The question is going to be according to the Chachamim, what it is that in addition, the Chachamim is going to assume that you're strict about not mixing together with your original chametz, and therefore what must have happened is you must have taken your 9 pieces of chametz, put them somewhere else, and these are 10 new pieces. Right? And therefore, you have to find those 9 other pieces, right? That's the stringency, right? So, whereas in the case of meiser sheni, right? But the parallel is, in cases you could assume that something happened and you forgot about it. Whereas Rebbe says, no, you don't have to worry about such a thing. And therefore, okay, just take all 10 pieces and get rid of them. It's chametz. The chametz say, no, maybe I switched it up. I switched it up. I forgot that I switched it up, and now in addition to these 10 pieces, I have to go find the other 9 pieces which I lost. Right? Big stringency. Fine. One more case. Let's say a person put 10 down and they only find 9. Hainu Seifa, that's the end case. The person leaves 2 mana of meiser sheni, umatzah mana, and they find only 1. Mana munach, umana mutal. Okay, so you assume that the mana of the original 2 was there, and the other mana was removed. Okay, so basically, fine. You assume that the what's still there is what was left there, and then the other parts it was removed. They say no. The same principle. Maybe you switched it out, both of them out, and therefore what's left over right now is all chulin. Okay, so basically, according to Rebbe in this case, Rebbe would say that one of the pieces, you have to assume that one of the pieces, since you left 10 and you only find 9, one of the pieces is now in the house. Okay, and the Chachamim say that what you have to do now is you have to search not for one piece of chametz, but rather for all 10 pieces, right? Because again, the Chachamim say that you have to assume that you took that piece out, that the piece that you find over there is not from the original piece. They're both now gone, right? That everything left is chulin. So similarly, they would have to say all 10 pieces have to be searched for because you assume that all those are gone. With me? Okay, fine. Hopefully none of these 10 things happen to you. We'll pick up on Yomi Beis, God willing, tomorrow.